Good evening once again, everyone. Hell's Unicorn here. And tonight I'm going to be covering a topic that I tend to avoid because, let's just say, certain topics are so unpleasant, or at least I find them so unpleasant, that I decide to avoid them altogether. But while I was surfing the web today and going through my usual media sources via YouTube, I came across a rather disturbing and disgusting article that I just had to comment on. It was a matter of necessity, basically. And this subject that I'm going to be covering is the subject of feminism. Now, for those of you who are not sure what my stance would be on this, a simple reading of my profile would probably give you a pretty good idea. I am a pretty strong anti-feminist for a number of reasons. My views about regarding tradition and my theology obviously put me at odds with it pretty significantly, and also my status as being a man who likes my freedom, that naturally also plays into it a little bit. I do believe in obligations, however I don't believe in unnecessary obligations, and I most definitely do not accept any form of slavery as being legitimate, no matter how it is rationalized. So anyway, this particular article is titled "Who's the Daddy?" and it was written by Melanie McDonough, and it's in the Spectator, the UK Spectator, and I am basically just going to give you a few pearls of wisdom from this article, a few quotes, if you will. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's pretty difficult to stomach and it would probably take a while. But this article pretty well demonstrates what I don't like about feminism. Alright, and here's the subheading. Paternity can now be verified by a simple test, but that doesn't mean it should be. So right away off the bat, before we even get into the meat and potatoes of the article, we have a number of ramifications set forth in the subheading of the title, which is this. Paternity can now be verified by a simple test. What does this mean? This means that we can come to a knowledge of facts that we may not have been fully aware of before. In other words, we have a little bit more truth revealed to us. But that doesn't mean it should be. See, one of my issues with feminism is that in addition to having a very distorted view of the nature of gender roles and of the overall nature of understanding nature itself, so to speak, feminism has a very difficult time with the truth in many respects, but particularly when it has to do with the relationship between men and women. Feminism has an utter contempt for the concept of traditional marriage and mutual obligation. They prefer the advantageous route of the woman and the less advantageous route for the man. That's the way it works. It's got nothing to do with equality. Get that out of your head. The name feminism in itself denotes a preferential view of one of the two genders, and it is not the one with the arrow coming out of the circle, let me tell you. So anyway, let's start with the first quote here that really got my attention. Now, a cotton wool swab with a bit of saliva plus a small fee, less than €200, can settle the matter. At a stroke, the one thing that women had going for them has been taken away, the one respect in which they had the last laugh over their husbands and lovers. Now, I don't like the general concept of fornicating and essentially living a live-loose lifestyle. I know other people have a less conservative view of sex than I do, but basically, long story short, I have little sympathy for either side when it comes to casual sex. But be that as it may, I view each as being equally guilty. So when I hear talk about one gender getting the last laugh over the other, it doesn't really sit well with me at all. But having this attitude about something that is a valid scientific means of coming to a knowledge of the truth really, really kind of rubs me the wrong way. And I do believe this is the reason why Richard Dawkins ended up coming out against feminism, because feminism has become increasingly anti-science. Now, naturally, I have problems with Dawkins, but this is something that him and I could probably get together on and have a good chat about the decline of the human race because of this sickness that is otherwise known as the third wave of feminism. But anyway, moving on. The subject has resurfaced lately, courtesy of a story in the Daily Mail about a married television presenter who for years had been paying for the support of a child conceived, as he thought, as a result of his relationship with a writer. It seems that after the meeting the child for the first time, he asked for a DNA test. It duly turned out that he was not, after all, the father. Poor child. Now, I admit that the truth is a pretty rough thing to deal with, but sooner or later we'll have to deal with it. And it's much more beneficial, I think, for a child to know the truth and to come to terms with the fact that that his or her mother is a live-loose tramp than it does for that child to go through its entire life thinking that its mother is an upstanding person, and then the mother proceeding to treat the child the way most live-loose mothers treat their children, which is as absolute shit, and then in turn the child turning out horrible. If a child comes to terms with the truth early on, it is better. It is not great. It's not the best scenario you can come up with, but given the circumstances, I would argue that the truth always prevails. But feminism takes a different view of this. Okay, there's a bunch of nonsense about Hollywood movies, which I'm going to skip over because, frankly, Hollywood gets enough news as it is, and I've been growing less and less interested in Hollywood over the course of the past 10 years. But anyway, by contrast, the old situation in which women presented men with a child and the man either did the decent thing and offered support or made a run for it allowed women a certain leeway. The courtesan of Balzac, who, on becoming pregnant, unhesitantly sought and got maintenance from two of her men friends, can't have been the only one. Uncertainty allows mothers to select for their children the father who would be best for them. So essentially what we have here, and again, I can't reiterate this enough, feminism is not about equality. It is about preferential treatment. We have the notion of women choosing men in such a way that really is unconscionable. I don't understand how people come to these views, but they do, and coping with it is quite a task. Uncertainty allows mothers to select for their children. No, the way this sentence should be restructured is uncertainty allows sluts and whores to select suckers to pick up the tab for their mutually shared sin. I know that term's going to offend some of my more secularistic subscribers, but that's the first word that pops into mind here. It takes two to tango, and when one tries to get out of the final dance, I'm sorry, I have zero sympathy for them. Okay, moving on. The point is that paternity was ambiguous, and it was effectively up to the mother to name her child's father or not. The eminently sensible Jewish custom, whereby Jewishness is passed through the mother, was based on the fact that we only really know who our mothers are, or at least we only really knew in that particular case. I don't know where the heck Judaism plays into this, but I can tell you right now, if it was established according to old Judaic law that this had occurred, both parties would, under the old law, be stoned to death. So this comes across as very disingenuous. Secularists and feminists have a strong propensity for abusing history and reshaping it to fit their own respective means, and they don't really pay full credit to what it is that they are citing. I'll give Occam's razor as a clear example. We have atheists, left and right, saying Occam's razor, Occam's razor. You know, the world is so much simpler without God. Bear in mind who you're quoting when you say entities shouldn't be multiplied beyond necessity. You are quoting a Franciscan monk who held God in much higher of an esteem than even the scientific method that he was kind of pointing towards with that statement. So if you're going to misuse something like Occam's razor, at least take Occam's name out of it and just rename it. Call it the atheist razor. Admit that you stole it from somebody else and just fiddled around with it to make it sound the way you wanted it to sound. But please, don't put words into William of Occam's mouth. As someone who is a Catholic, it's very offensive. All right, I got off on a tangent there. I'm going to read the last paragraph of this disgusting article, and then I'm going to give you my final thoughts on it. Our generation sets a good deal of store by certain knowledge, and DNA tests have obvious advantages when it comes to identifying less happy elements of our heredity, congenital disease, for instance. But in making paternity conditional on a test rather than the say-so of the mother, it has removed from women a powerful instrument of choice. Oh, so lying is a choice. And choice, whenever you get that stupid bromide, choice this, choice that, pro-choice, blah, blah, blah. What you're actually hearing is half of a statement. The full statement is not merely pro-choice, it is pro-choice without consequence. All right? Got to throw consequence in there to complete the sentence. Every choice has a result. We have cause and we have effect. You can't divorce the two from each other. Anyway, the final sentence is, I'm not sure that many people are much happier for it. You know something? A lot of people are happier for it. A lot of men who have made the idiotic mistake of bedding a whore and then finding out later that the whore took him for a ride and tried to lie to him and tell him that he was the father of a child, that man is happier for it. I'm not saying that that man is somebody that we should look up to, somebody who lives loose, who plays the field, but I would venture to guess that a person who has a couple of indiscretions is not worthy of being the slave of somebody who makes a life out of indiscretions. And then on top of this, the cavalier view towards science and DNA testing in particular. There are a lot of benefits to DNA testing. We can identify criminals by this method. You know, we can establish somebody's genetic lineage, so they can figure out where they've come from and where they're going. There's a lot of advantages to DNA testing beyond just the medical applications of it, but I don't think that this writer would want to cite the criminal justice advantages of DNA, because I think the subject would cross a little too closely to the, let's just say, civil disobedience that's really going on here, or I would refer to it as uncivil disobedience or moral laxity, for lack of a better term. So anyway, I encourage all who want to engage in a fit of extreme masochism, go ahead, read this article in full. I've provided a link in the sidebar. And then you'll learn firsthand why I am not a feminist, why I like being a man, don't feel guilty for having that Y chromosome, and why I hold feminism in contempt and hope that it dies a quick and convenient death. And I mean convenient for the rest of the human race, because with the destruction of the tradition-based relationship between men and women, humanity ain't got a prayer. It may take a while for the end result to manifest itself, but I guarantee you, feminism taken to its logical conclusion is the destruction of the human race. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.